So for part 2, we are going to open up our player object again, and we're going to go into our, we've got this bit here done, I'll just open it up, just have to find where we're up to. A key should be fine, D key should be fine. We are going to go into and create a begin step. So it's going to do, what begin step does, it happens before the frame is drawn to the screen. So we can set up our animations and things in here and just keep it separate from step. It essentially does the same thing, but just like a minuscule of a second before step happens. So what we need to do is we need to check to see if the object's in the air, because what we want to do, if the player's in the air, we want to play the jump animation. If the player is falling, we want to play the landing animation. If the player is on an object, we want to change it back to the moving animation, and so on. So let's do that in here. We'll check if v-speed is greater than or smaller than 0, so it must be negative. Then we're going to change the sprite into sprite jump. Now there's no animations on this, it's just a static image, so we can leave that. And then we go to here. If v-speed is greater than 0, we're going to change it to sprite land, and once again it's just a static image. And then finally, if there is a collision below the object, so tick the relative for that one, we're going to change it back to the sprite player. So that's pretty much it for that bit. Now we'll add in some jumping, because then we can start testing it, and we're going to add in a key press, because we don't want to be able to hold down the button and continually be able to jump, so we're going to make it a key press, letters, W. Key press, letters, and W. So in here, this is quite a convoluted bit, so I'm going to need to explain it as we go and make a bit more space in here. First thing we're going to do is check to see if they're standing on something. So if there's a collision below the object, 1 relative, then we're going to set the vertical speed to jump speed. So remember, we set jump speed back here. We should actually be able to just test it now. So let's test this. You can see that jumping animation works there. Which looks pretty cool. So we've got our guy jumping all around everywhere. Now, if we go back up to create, remember that I set a variable can jump to 0. This is for the double jump bit. When it collides with the object, we need to make sure at some stage that we set the can jump back to 1. So what we need to do in here, we're going to add something, and we'll add it right at the top here. If there's an object below this, because we don't want to do it when we touch it left or right, because then we'll be able to float up walls, is when there's an object directly below this, then we're going to set the variable can jump back to 1. Not 21, but just back to 1. Now in here, for the W key, we are going to now put in a little sub-function here. So what I think I was saying was that we're going to now check for double jumps, and also we'll check for wall jumps at the same time. So first of all, we need to check to make sure that there's nothing underneath it. If there's no object underneath it. And the way we do that is we do the same thing, relative, except we click this not button. So this is going to say if there's not a collision, if there's no block underneath the player, then I'm going to have to use these code blocks here, because otherwise it's going to get really difficult to follow. First thing we're going to check is the double jump. If can jump is equal to 1, then we're going to set the vertical speed to jump speed, and we're also going to set the variable can jump to 0. Now notice that I've used capital J for can jump. You don't have to, but you need to be consistent. So can jump with a big J and can jump with a little j will mean different things. So I probably should have used all little case letters since I've done it for other stuff. It's up to you, but make sure that you're consistent. And I also need to put these in code blocks. So what this is saying, if this is true, then do this stuff in this block. If this is true, do this stuff in this block. So we can actually test this now, and I should be able to double jump. So W, there's my double jump, and I can't keep jumping. But as soon as I hit that block, it resets my double jump. And you can see that it moves pretty fast, except that animation's not playing there at the moment. So it kind of looks like he's floating along. We'll do the wall jumps a bit later, once we've got those in there, and we'll get the animations working a bit better now. I think the animations here, I'm not sure where the animation bit is. Change sprite into here. Oh, here we go. So this bit should be subimage -1, speed, animation speed. That's where it was. In begin step, change sprite into sprite player, and now the animation is working. So we should be able to do that. So animation speed here, it might need to go a bit faster. And there is a problem in that when we're standing still, he still works. Now what I could do, and I might do it afterwards, is make it so the animation speed actually increases, which would be quite cool. We can make the animation speed a maximum speed relative to each other. So let's go into our object and make a few more modifications in here. We'll do the animation speed stuff later. And yes, I know I'm doing this all over the place, but this is kind of the process that you're going to take when you're trialing and making a prototype. So I'm going to have keyboard now, and one of these is no key. It's actually right down the bottom. What I'm going to do when there's no key pressed is set it to just an idle animation. And this is pretty straightforward. Oops, no key. I have copied the wrong thing there. No key. We want to check to see if he's standing on something. So by now you should know that that is this one here, check collision. And it's going to be 1, which is below the object, relative. And if that's the case, we're going to change the sprite to sprite stand, subimage -1, animation speed. Oops. Animation speed. That should be it for that. So hit play. So he stands there looking around, and then we've got the run animation. I should be able to fall down that gap. And I can run all this way. Oops, and there's nothing there. So he falls off. Alright, so that's mostly that guy working. Last thing we'll do is the wall jumps here. So for the W key, I'm going to add a whole lot more to this. And it's going to be in here, so we're still checking if there's a collision at a position. And what we're going to do is, if there is a collision at that position, then we're going to make another check underneath here. I'm going to put these 2 checks in. One is going to be, is there a wall on the left-hand side now? So that's going to be -1 here, relative. And I put a code block under that. And then the second check down here, is there a wall on the right-hand side? Relative, and I put code blocks under here. Now I'm going to put code comments in so this is more readable. Check if player can double jump. This one here. Check if player can wall jump off left wall. And the final one. Check if player can wall jump off right wall. So I've got those there. Let's do some setting of variables. So if they're on the left hand side, we want to add jump speed to that. But for horizontal, I actually want to move them away from the wall, so they're kind of jumping out from it. So we want to add some horizontal speed as well. And if this is on the left wall, we want to make them move to the right, so they're kind of jumping out. So I could just put max speed here, which is 12 or something like that. Now for the other one though, down here, well, we're going to set it to jump speed, again, for the vertical. But then the horizontal speed is going to be set to negative max speed, because we want them to jump out to the left. And that should be it. That should work. And hopefully you understand the logic behind that. I'm going to go into the room and I'm going to put in, we'll just go and do some objects down here. So in this area here, I'm just going to make kind of a tunnel for the player to jump up. Maybe like that. And before I test this, I'm just going to change a view here. So down the bottom, this bit, I'm going to change it to 50, which means that the player has to get within 50 pixels of the edge of the screen for the screen to start moving. So like that, and then I can run and kind of jump a little bit better. So when I go here, you can see how he jumps off that wall. If I go up to here and jump, he kicks out from the wall. I can still double jump, but I can't double jump and wall jump. So personally, I think that's pretty cool. And I can double jump and then wall jump like that. And if I'm in here, I can do something like this and double jump all the way up that tunnel. So I've kind of got some parkour happening here. Running speed looks pretty neat. Double jumping action. It's all looking good. Let's add in some knives. Now we're going to need an object for the knife. So we're going to add an object. I'm going to call it OBJ knife. And by the way, I called this game Knife Strife. I was thinking of Knife Life. That might be alright as well. We're not going to worry about title screens or anything. This is more of an exercise in using those sprites and tile sets, and also just a bit more complicated programming. So this sprite is an animated knife that I drew, and it just looks like this. Well, we can't really see it there. If I edit this, so it's just got some simple animation on it, rotates around, and that's it. Not very difficult at all. We're also going to need another object, an explode object. Object explode. So this is going to happen when the sprite hits a wall or something. We're going to make the object explode. So we'll come back to those. And object knife. So if we load up an object knife, add event, create event. We don't want the knife to immediately start falling with gravity. And once again, this took me a little while to figure out. So I don't mind if you use stuff like this in your final game, as long as you trial and test different ways of doing things instead of just copying it straight up. I'm going to set the number of steps to 4 in this alarm that I'm creating. That means there's going to be 4 steps before I initiate the gravity in the game. So alarm 0, and then we're going to initiate gravity in here. Set the gravity to 70 to 2. Double speed gravity is going to pull this knife down really quick. I also need to make an event, collision with the block, and what I'm going to do is when it collides with the block, change it into that explosion event. Except if I do it without, change it into that explosion, this one here. So change it into the explode object. However, if I just do it like this, what will happen is the explode object will keep moving. It's a bit weird, so I need to set the gravity to 0 and the vertical or the speed, this one here, the speed to 0 as well. And so it resets this, it stops the knife moving, then we'll change it into that object explosion. So that's the knife, not very hard. The explode object is also pretty straightforward. Add event, create, and on the create event I'm just going to change the sprite into explode, but this is going to be -1, and the speed is going to be 0.3, I think. What did I change it to on the other one? 0.1. That was probably a bit too short, maybe 0.2. So 0.2 for the speed of that object. Now I only wanted to play this animation once, so that's quite cool because I've got an other event here called animation end. When the animation ends, destroy the object. So the knife has been turned into the object explode. Once the animation ends, I destroy object explode. Simple. But I need a way to shoot it. So lastly, let's go into create event and go down to extra, and right at the bottom there's this one called set cursor. So let's set the cursor up to be our cursor here and don't show the actual cursor, and that's going to mean that when I run the game, my mouse cursor in game looks like that. So that's going to be used to aim. And then add event mouse. I'll bring this up here because you need to see this. Mouse, right down the bottom is global mouse. Left button, no button, left press, left release, all this stuff here. They're to do with the sprite, and it means if I push left button, I have to actually click on my guy in order to have it trigger left button. But global mouse just means anywhere in the screen if I click the left button. So global left button. There's also global left pressed, which means you push it down. Global left released, which means you lift it up. I think I probably want global left pressed, not global left button. And on here, it is going to be very, very simple. Well, we'll see. We're going to check first to see how many knives are left on the screen. 2 knives smaller than. If the number of knives is less than 2, then we're going to create a knife. And we're going to create it moving. So we're going to create a knife. We're going to create it at X, and I'm going to make it -8, which means it's going to come out of his head or upper body rather than right in the center of this guy. Speed. The speed is going to be dependent on how far across or how far away our mouse is. So what we do is we use a special function in GameMaker called distance to point. We need to give it a point, and we use another special variable called mouse_x, mouse_y. So what it's doing is it's going to be distance to point, mouse_x, mouse_y. That's going to be in pixels, and then I'm going to divide it by 10 because, you know, if it's 100 pixels away, well, we don't want it shooting at speed 100 because this is going to glitch out of the screen. So we'll divide it by 10 and then add 2. So if we click on our guy really close to it, it's not going to do it at speed like 0.1. The minimum speed will be like 2.1 or something. And the direction, we're going to use a special function here, which is called point direction, and x, y plus 16. Now this plus 16 is just going to increase it a little bit, so I probably don't even need it, but it'll just increase the angle of it a bit, get it up a bit higher. And mouse x, mouse y. Now what this does, if any of you know anything about vectors whatsoever, it determines a 2D vector on which to move this which to move this sprite, or which to move this object. If you don't know anything about vectors, you don't need to know or understand what's happening here. You can just type the code in. It's point direction. The first argument is x, then y plus 16, and then comma mouse x_x, comma mouse_y, close brackets. And tick relative. So this is where it creates it, 0, -8 relative. So let's test it now. My guy here, I can throw a knife. I can only throw 2 knives at a time. And you see if I throw it up here, it throws it a lot further than if I just click it here. So it's all looking pretty good at the moment. So we've actually got the potential to make a really cool speedy game in here. Second to last thing I want to do is just fix these little glitchy lines up. And that's an error with GameMaker, which is what happens if you use views and you don't have the same value here and here and here and here. So what I'm going to do for the port on screen is just add 1 to each of these. And when I hit play, all those glitchies will be gone. And it works perfectly. Second to last thing, turn the object block to be invisible. I'll still be able to collide with it, but now I get the proper colors down there. I might decide I don't actually want it to be that small. Let's make it 240 by 180, I think. And I should be able to see a bit more of my screen now. Yep, there we go. So 240 by 180. You can see more of my screen. I can actually throw the knife further. And I'll need to increase this up here, because I get there and I can't quite see what's coming up. So that's down the bottom here. Make it 120. And we'll make this 120 as well. So then I get to there, and he kind of keeps him in the center of the screen, which is pretty cool. Now there is a problem here. Okay, so if you remember, that's where I had the, oops, it's got stuck, I'm not sure why. But I had those bits in there, so I need to remove those, because if they're invisible, I can't actually see them anymore. Now there is a little bit of a problem with this. If I'm shooting this way, they are being launched at the same speed as my guy, which means that he's actually running as fast as them. So I might want to change that with the object player. Global left press, create moving instance, speed, +2. I might change it to even +5 or something. So it's always going to be going faster than him. That way if I'm running forward, I'm still throwing those knives out in front. It does give the potential to throw really fast knives though. However, the fastest they can be thrown is like that. And that's pretty far, but then they get destroyed after 2 seconds anyway. And they're not too bad. Cool.